Let's resume. Now, I think that in between you have asked yourself questions. One question I have already replied, that PNG and CNG, they are same, because one is compressed natural gas, second is piped natural gas. So that's same, PNG and CNG. Natural gas is methane. Now, next question that you have asked me, that what is the effect of Josimat crisis on the Himalayan biodiversity hotspot? See, that would be having a detrimental impact, but first of all, know that how Josimat crisis occurred. Now, Josimat crisis is linked to the Chamoli crisis, the Chamoli disaster of 2021. In Chamoli, what happened was that a glacier, it separated from the bedrock, and this bedrock was 6,000 meters deep inside. So the glacier separated from the bedrock 6,000 meters deep, and this glacier started to move. So it was nothing but an avalanche, and the debris which were released due to this, and also due to the frictional force which is generated, and frictional force is generated due to movement of the snow. Now the frictional force generated due to movement of the snow is responsible for what? It is responsible for formation of water. So the debris which were released, now that was responsible for formation of an artificial lake at the confluence of two streams, Ranti and Rishiganga. Two streams, Ranti and Rishiganga. And the water which was generated by the movement of the snow, because the frictional force would be responsible for generating water. This water accumulated where? It accumulated in the artificial lake, accumulated in the artificial lake which was formed due to the debris. But this artificial lake lasted for 2 or 3 minutes only, 2 or 3 minutes only, and it bursted open. So it bursted open to remove, to wipe out two important projects of that area. One was your Vishnugad, and second is the Tapovan projects. So that was wiped out. But we can see the water, it accumulated in the canal. It accumulated in the canal, the debris accumulated in the canal, and this canal was 12 kilometers long and 6 meters in diameter. Clear? Now this accumulated in a canal, and the canal was established near Tapovan and Vishnugad project. So the muddy waters accumulated, the debris accumulated, and the company which was responsible for carrying a project was responsible for what? In that canal, we can see a boring machine of that company was also present. So this happened in the year 2021. When Josimat disaster occurred, cracks were witnessed, and in the road the cracks witnessed, and muddy water came out. Now the muddy water came out from where? It came out from the canal where it had accumulated earlier in 2021. And what happened in this area was that explosives were used by the company which was carrying out this project to reach to the boring machine which was trapped inside the canal. So explosives were there used. Although the company denied that use of explosives has taken place, but the local people said that explosives were used, which resulted in Josimat disaster. And second thing is what? That the main reason for these disasters to occur is development in a haphazard manner. This is an ecologically fragile area. When you talk about what is the impact on Himalaya biodiversity hotspot, Himalayan biodiversity hotspot have been largely affected. Why? Because the impact is due to the anthropogenic activities which are conducted in this area. And one such activity was the establishment of Tapovan and Vishnugad project. development in a haphazard manner, construction of roads, blocking of natural pattern of drainage. All these are responsible for enhancing the vulnerability of Himalayas. When we talk about vulnerability of Himalayas, we can see that if suppose a question is asked to you about the vulnerability of Himalayas, because Himalayas is a hotspot of India, biodiversity hotspot of India. So if a question is asked on the vulnerability of Himalayas, you can divide your answer into two considerations. One would be your natural consideration. Natural consideration means what? That Himalayas are naturally vulnerable to earthquakes. Himalayas are naturally vulnerable to landslides. Himalayas are naturally vulnerable to cloud bursting. And landslides, why? Because there are a number of parallel folds present in Himalayas. And these parallel folds means a number of steep slopes are present, because of which it happens to be vulnerable for landslides. First thing, it is vulnerable for cloud bursting because of the steep slopes of Himalayas. And cloud bursting would be always followed by heavy rainfall and landslides. If cloud bursting takes place, it would be followed by heavy rainfall and landslides. Clear? So cloud bursting, if it is taking place, it is followed by heavy rainfall and landslides. So that's why it is vulnerable. So vulnerability of Himalayas is on account of earthquakes also can be responsible for landslides. Now this is the natural vulnerability of Himalayas. And earthquakes occur in Himalayas because the subduction of Indian plate is taking place under the Eurasian plate. So that's the reason. But when we talk about vulnerability of Himalayas due to anthropogenic factors, there are many anthropogenic factors which are responsible for that. One anthropogenic factor which is responsible for that is what? We have constructed a number of dams and reservoirs. Dams enhance the vulnerability for earthquakes because the pressure exerted would be responsible for seismic activities. And when seismic activities come, the earthquakes come, dam would be bursting, and dam burst resulting in flash floods, which would be responsible for degradation in Himalayas. So that's one thing. On the other hand, we can see also that we have constructed a number of biomedical industries in Himalayas. We have constructed a number of not only biomedical industries in Himalayas, dams and reservoirs, tourist centers. All these are responsible for degradation of Himalayas on a large scale. And plus we can see that we were also responsible for anthropogenic activities, were also responsible for global warming and climate change. Global warming and climate change. And due to global warming and climate change, the Himalayan glaciers have melted. The Himalayan glaciers have melted. And this melting of Himalayan glacier is responsible for what? If melting of Himalayan glaciers takes place, this disturbs the sustainability of life of 1 billion people. Because sustainability of life of 1 billion people depends upon the perennial rivers originating from Himalayas. It also disrupts power generation, hydroelectricity generation, because a number of hydroelectric projects are established on the Himalayas. So this is how it would be impacting on Himalayas. Clear? This is how it would be impacting on Himalayas. Now that's one answer, that does central government or state government declare biosphere reserve, or it is declared by UNESCO? See, it is declared by UNESCO's. It is declared under Man and Biosphere Program of UNESCO. Approval would be given by the central government, but it is declared under NTP. You have written, sir, NTPC is government sponsors. So when government was responsible for Joseph, see, I told you, you use the word company. I deliberately did not indulge in saying that this is a government agency. Fine. And you have to be very tactical in using these words. Because there are reports that explosives were used. And the report has come out in the journals, you can see. The local people say that yes, they used explosives to reach to that machine, boring machine, which is trapped inside. And this resulted in Josimath disaster. Fine. See, directly you should not blame the government because you are going to become a part of the government. So I advise you, indirectly you can use the words so that the direct blame on the government does not come. Clear? Direct blame on the government does not come. But this is how the vulnerability of Himalayas would be written. You have to divide your answer into two considerations: natural factors, earthquakes, cloud bursting, landslides, and then anthropogenic factor, construction of dams, reservoirs, then also development in haphazard manner, construction of a number of biomedical industries, number of tourist centers. All these are responsible for disrupting the natural pattern of drainage, triggering a number of disasters as such. Clear? Now, there is a concept of what is called as biodiversity mega hotspots. We have discussed hotspots. Now, what is called as mega hotspots? Now, Conservation International is an international organization, and Conservation International says that an area can be declared as biodiversity hotspot. See, if you see Mayer's definition, although it is mentioned biodiversity, but it emphasizes only and only on flora. It does not talk about fauna. But Conservation International does not differentiate between it and says that biodiversity mega hotspots are areas of immense biodiversity. That's clear. We are not talking exclusively about fauna or exclusively about flora. So these are areas of immense biodiversity threatened due to human intervention. So they have been threatened due to human intervention. And they lie at the confluence of, they lie at the meeting point of more than two countries. So they are lying at the meeting point of more than two countries. So they would be called as what? They would be referred to as mega hotspots. More than two countries. They would be referred to as mega hotspots. Why? Because they are lying at the confluence of more than two countries. They have been threatened. That's why they are hotspot, because emergency interventions would be required. And they are areas of immense biodiversity. There are 12 such hotspots in the world. Remember only one, and that is Namdhapa National Park. Namdhapa National Park is in Arunachal Pradesh, and it is at the confluence of India, Myanmar and China. Since it is a national park, you can say that this is a tiger reserve. This is a tiger reserve. Write down biodiversity mega hotspots. Biodiversity mega hotspots. According to Conservation International, these are areas of immense biodiversity. These are areas of immense biodiversity. Areas of immense biodiversity. These are areas of immense biodiversity. Threatened due to human intervention. These are areas of immense biodiversity threatened due to human intervention, and they lie at the confluence of, more than two countries, and they lie at the confluence of more than two countries. And they lie at the confluence of more than 2 countries. That's why they are mega. There are 12 such hotspots in the world. There are 12 such hotspots in the world. 12 such hotspots in the world. One of which is present in India. One of which is present in India. The Namdhapa National Park. The Namdhapa National Park in Arunachal Pradesh. The Namdhapa National Park in Arunachal Pradesh, which is at the confluence of, see, what is ecological diversity? Ecology, you know. Ecology means what? Ecology is nothing but the species diversity, the genetic variation, the abundance of species, the habitat diversity. So all these would be constituting the ecological diversity. Namdhapa National Park in Arunachal Pradesh, which is a tiger reserve. Tiger reserve. Namdhapa National Park in Arunachal Pradesh, which is a tiger reserve. Clear? Tiger reserve. Because it's a national park, so it should be dedicated to one animal, and that's what? That's a tiger reserve. Now that's your Namdhapa National Park in Arunachal Pradesh. So out of 12, one is present in India. Mega hotspots is present in India. And this lies at the confluence of what? India, China and Myanmar. Now it lies at the confluence of, India, Myanmar and China. India, Myanmar and China. Myanmar and China. Clear? Fine. Also we can see that if we talk about the biodiversity of Earth, more than 50% of biodiversity of Earth is concentrated only and only in 17 countries of the world. And these countries are called as what? These countries are referred to as mega biodiverse countries of the world. More than 50% of biodiversity of Earth is concentrated in 17 countries. So these countries are called as mega biodiverse countries of the world. India happens to be one of the mega biodiverse countries. Clear? India is one of the mega biodiverse countries of the world. So that you have to know. Mega biodiverse countries of the world among these 17. Write down, more than 50% of biodiversity of Earth. More than 50% of biodiversity of Earth. Biodiversity of Earth is concentrated. More than 50% of biodiversity of Earth is concentrated. In 17 countries. In 17 countries, which are referred to as mega biodiverse countries. Mega biodiverse countries. Mega biodiverse countries. 17 countries which are referred to as mega biodiverse countries. India is one of them. India is one of them. One of them. Clear? India is one of the mega biodiverse countries of the world, we can say. Also, as far as biodiversity is concerned, we can see that now let's move forward and come out of this and discuss in biodiversity and conservation that what is eco-sensitive zones. So let's come out and discuss what is eco-sensitive zones. Already we have completed national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves we know, and we have differentiated between national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, biodiversity hotspot, biodiversity mega hotspot. Now let us discuss what is called as eco-sensitive zones. So let's cover that, and then we start with bioremediation, phytoremediation, the processes, and discuss also why landfills are a concern. Then we start with ozone layer and ozone layer depletion. See, suppose this is an area, this is a protected area. This can be a biosphere reserve, this can be a national park, or this can be a wildlife sanctuary. This can be a wildlife sanctuary. So this is what? This is a protected area, national park, or it can be a wildlife sanctuary. So this can be a protected area. Now beyond the protected area, to a stretch of about 5 kilometers, we should establish, we should establish what is called as eco-sensitive zones. We should be responsible for establishing what is called as eco-sensitive zone. And when we are talking about eco-sensitive zone, why we should be establishing? Because this would be acting as a shock observer. This would be acting as not only a shock observer, insulator also we can say. Because this is a highly protected area. This is a very low protected area. So it would be acting as an insulator, it would be acting as a shock observer between a high protected area and a low protected area. High protected area and a low protected. So the impact of anthropogenic activity which is taking place here would be disallowed on the protected area. Clear? I repeat once more. Let's suppose this is protected area, biosphere reserve, national park, or wildlife sanctuaries. Now beyond the protected area to a stretch of about 5 kilometers, we should establish what is called as eco-sensitive zone. Eco-sensitive zone. And this would be acting as a shock observer. This would be acting as an insulator to disallow the impact of anthropogenic activities on the protected area. So the anthropogenic activities impact would be disallowed on the protected area. So that can be said. Now, references to eco-sensitive zone has been made at 2 places. We can see that references to eco-sensitive zone has been made in the National Wildlife Action Plan 2002 to 2016. So that has been made. And we can see that references to eco-sensitive zone also has been made in the Environment Protection Act of 1986. The 2 places where references to eco-sensitive zone has been made. One is the Environment Protection Act of 1986, and second I have said is the National Wildlife Action Plan 2002 to 2016. So references have been made. Now, in the eco-sensitive zone, we can see activities can be divided into 3 types. Some activity would be permissible. Permissible means that they would be allowed. For example, your day-to-day activity like agriculture would be considered as, see, I'll come to biodiversity. We haven't completed. These things are very simple. Alpha, beta, gamma, fine. So in situ conservation, ex situ, so we'll cover up. But wait for time, let us complete these chapters, and these are very simple terms. Alpha, biodiversity. We haven't completed biodiversity. Biodiversity is in a more comprehensive manner, it would be covered under geography. In environment less, because in geography they would be discussing the geographical features also. So I'll discuss all these terms. Let's come to one by one. Let's come to all these things. First, let us complete some important chapters, and then we'll discuss those terms. Alpha, biodiversity. This is the biodiversity present within that area itself, and the beta biodiversity. It is across the ecosystem that we can see. Gamma biodiversity. So there are different kinds of biodiversity we'll discuss, but these things are not even asked in UPSC because everybody knows that. Fine. But I'll come and I'll discuss one by one all these terms. Don't worry about that. Let us complete first of all these portions. Now, because these are more meaningful, on which questions are more asked in your examination. Now, see, in situ conservation, ex situ conservation. In situ is where the habitat is. Ex situ is beyond the habitat. Fine. So these things are very simple. Let's first of all concentrate on these things, and then we'll come to all those things and discuss. So I'll discuss all those terms. I'll make a list of the terms and discuss all those terms with you. Some already I have discussed in the last class. Fine. Some I'll discuss after some time. Let's cover up some important things in between, because let's see the questions also. Now, we can see that activities in these areas would be divided into three types. One is your permissible activity. Permissible activity includes what? Permissible activity includes day-to-day activity like agriculture, which is allowed for you. You can indulge in that activity. Second is regulated activity. It is allowed for you, but it is regulated by law. For example, widening of roads. For example, establishment of river embankments. So these kind of activities would be called as what? These kind of activities would be referred to as regulated activities. Clear? These kind of activities would be called as what? They would be referred to as regulated activities. And then comes prohibited activities. That what activities would be prohibited? Fine. What activities are prohibited? Now, prohibited activities include establishment of industries. You cannot establish industries in that area. Prohibited activity includes what? Not only establishment of industries, but even establishment of sawmills. Sawmills where the logs are made. So that would be also considered as what? Prohibited activity. So it includes permissible, it includes regulated, it includes prohibited activity. Fine. But the most important contemporary issue associated with eco-sensitive zone is the condition of Western Ghats. See, Western Ghat, you know, is a biodiversity hotspot of India. It's a paradise of biodiversity on earth, said by M.S. Swaminathan. And we are gradually losing Western Ghats because degradation of this area is taking place. And there are many reasons behind degradation of Western Ghat. One is development in a haphazard manner which is taking place near Western Ghats. Development in a haphazard manner which is taking place near Western Ghats. Then we can see that illegal mining activities which have taken place near Western Ghats. Establishment of a number of power lines in Western Ghats. Not only establishment of a number of power lines, establishment of a number of power lines. Also we can see extension of agriculture, establishment of industries. Now all these were reasons behind degradation in Western Ghats. So a committee was established. It was taken note by the government and a committee was established. And this committee was called as Madhav Gadgil Committee. This committee gave its recommendation. And the recommendation was given in the year 2011. The recommendation was what? That out of 1,64,000 square kilometer Western Ghat, 1,29,000 square kilometers should be declared as eco-sensitive zone. Now this is a big chunk of the territory. The government rejected this report. Another committee was established. And that committee is called as what? That committee was called as Kasturi Rangam Committee, which gave its recommendation in the year 2013. And it recommended that that out of 1,64,000 square kilometer Western Ghat, 59,940 square kilometers should be declared as eco-sensitive zone. Now, this was roughly acceptable to the draft recommendation of the government. So, Kasturirangan committee was acceptable and the Madhav Gadgil committee's recommendation were simply rejected. So, this you have to know, that what is the reason behind degradation of Western Ghats and what were the committee's recommendation. Clear? What were the committee's recommendation? Write down. Eco-sensitive zones. Eco-sensitive zones. Beyond the protected area, see, initially it was 10 kilometers. In 2014, it was reduced to 5 kilometers. Now, the Supreme Court has recommended that should be 1 kilometer only. One kilometer only. Write down. Beyond the protected area, to a stretch of about 5 kilometers, the eco-sensitive zone should be established. To a stretch of about 5 kilometers, the eco-sensitive zone should be established. Eco-sensitive zone should be established, which would be acting as insulator, or a shock observer, which would be acting as an insulator or a shock observer, disallowing, which would be acting as an insulator or shock observer, disallowing the impact of human activities on protected area. Disallowing the impact of anthropogenic activities, you can write, or human activities, you can write. Disallowing the impact of human activities on the protected area. Within the area. Clear? Disallowing the impact of anthropogenic activities on the protected area. Write down references to eco-sensitive zone. References to eco-sensitive zone. References to eco-sensitive zone. Eco-sensitive zone have been made, not has been made. References to eco-sensitive zone have been made in the National Wildlife Action Plan 2002 to 2016. National Wildlife Action Plan 2002 to 2016. And second, Environment Protection Act 1986. Environment Protection Act 1986. Clear? 1986. Write down activities in this area. Can be divided into three. First, permissible activity, first, permissible activity, which includes day-to-day activity like agriculture, See, in UPSC they have asked you, agriculture is the only activity permissible in this area. That's wrong, because agriculture is one of the protected, activity, day-to-day activity which is allowed in this area. So that would be considered as wrong. Clear? So first is permissible activity. Second, regulated activity. It means that they would be regulated by law. They are permissible, but they would be regulated by law. Regulated activity, which includes widening of roads, सड़कों को चौड़ा बनाना, widening of roads, and also establishment of river embankments, So all these kind of activity would be what? It would be called as regulative activity. Clear? Fine. So that would be called as regulated activity. And the third would be prohibited activity. Write down prohibited activity. I think my speed is fine for you. Prohibited activity, which includes establishment of industries, or even sawmills, establishment of industries or even sawmills. So that kind of activity would be called as prohibited activity. And now let's discuss in this case that what is the Madhav Gadgil Committee recommendation and Kasturi Rangam, because the only burning issue which is related to eco-sensitive zone is what? It is the Western Ghat. Fine. And we have discussed two recommendations, the Madhav Gadgil Committee recommendation and Kasturi Rangam Committee recommendation. So let's make a reference to these recommendations. And now your question, because you asked the question in between. See, fundamental species, when you are talking about fundamental species, these species are necessary for the ecosystem. Because if these species are not present there, then it cannot be called as an ecosystem properly. And keystone species, I said that they are responsible for maintaining the structure of ecosystem. Fundamental species means the basic species. Microbes should be present in that area. That's a basic species which should be present. And next is what? Next is, sir, will you please explain alpha, beta? Okay. No, I've told you, just wait and I'll explain. See, when you're talking about alpha biodiversity means that this is the biodiversity within an ecosystem. For example, it may be an ecosystem, may be a forest ecosystem. And if we suppose we are comparing the two biodiversity of two forest ecosystem, then it would be called as beta diversity. And third is, if suppose we are responsible for determining or examining the biodiversity of an entire landscape, then that would be called as what? Then that would be called as gamma biodiversity. So alpha is within an ecosystem, beta is comparison between two ecosystems, and if the diversity for an entire landscape is to be determined, then that would be called as what? Then that would be referred to as nothing but, then that kind of biodiversity would be referred to as what? It would be called as the gamma biodiversity for the entire landscape. So alpha for single ecosystem, comparison between two ecosystem, maybe it may be a forest, and comparison between the two ecosystem beta, and for the entire landscape, that's gamma. Now, in situ conservation, I have told you, within the habitat itself, ex situ outside the habitat, if we are responsible for conserving. Now let's return back again and then in between, if you ask you question, I'll reply, but just reply after the completion of that topic. Now let's see. Now we have studied eco-sensitive zone. Write down. Now in this context, we will study, in one context we have studied the Himalayas, why vulnerability of Himalayas is there. In this context, we would be responsible for studying the vulnerability of Western Ghats. Write down, vulnerability of Western Ghats. Vulnerability of Western Ghats. That's the topic. And just gist about that, that if suppose asked in your examination. Vulnerability of Western Ghats. Western Ghat is a biodiversity hotspot of India. Western Ghat is a biodiversity hotspot of India. Biodiversity hotspot of India. And is also referred to as the paradise of biodiversity on earth. And is also referred to as the paradise of biodiversity on earth. Paradise of biodiversity on earth. Paradise of biodiversity on earth. It covers an area of 1,64,000 square kilometer. It covers an area of 1,64,000 square kilometer, and is suffering from degradation, due to extension of agriculture, extension of agriculture establishment of a number of industries, illegal mining activity, illegal mining activities, establishment of a number of power lines, The Madhav Gadgil Committee recommendation, the Madhav Gadgil Committee in the year 2011, the Madhav Gadgil Committee in the year 2011 recommended that 1,29,000 square kilometer of Western Ghat, 1,29,000 square kilometer of Western Ghat, 29,000 square kilometer of Western Ghat would be declared as eco-sensitive zone, But this recommendation was rejected by the government. Recommendation was rejected by the government. Another committee was established another committee was established called Kasturi-Rangam Committee. Another committee was established called Kasturi-Rangam Committee. Kasturi-Rangam Committee. And in the year 2013, it recommended that 59,940 square kilometer of Western Ghat, 59,940 square kilometer of Western Ghat, should be declared as eco-sensitive zone. Should be declared as eco-sensitive zone. Eco-sensitive zone, which was acceptable to the government in its draft recommendation. Which was acceptable to the government in its draft recommendation. But see, remember one thing, that non-acceptance of Madhav Gadgil Committee's recommendation was responsible for Kerala floods of 2018. Why? Because the area which was recommended by Madhav Gadgil Committee, that is 1,29,000, should be declared as eco-sensitive zone. Bulk of that area was in Kerala, where environmental degradation on a large scale took place. Bulk of that area was in Kerala, where environmental degradation on a large scale took place. Now, this was responsible for what? This was responsible for certainly the Kerala, one of the reasons behind Kerala floods, because Kerala floods occurred why? Due to disruption of natural pattern of drainage, due to environmental degradation. So, non-acceptance of Madhav Gadgil Committee's recommendation was considered to be one of the reasons behind Kerala floods. Clear? Now, let's solve a test paper here on whatever we have studied. Now see, the test has been given to you. So the test has been, I think that the test has been given to you. So let's see the test. Let's come to the test. Fine. Now see the questions. Test दे दिया है. Test. Test दे दिया था ना इन लोगों को. One. Now see, this test has been forwarded to you. And what is the questions? What are the questions? Consider the following statement and select the correct code. Biosphere reserves are the most comprehensive protected area. Is it so? And second is what? Second is hotels and resorts can be established in eco-sensitive zone under regulation. And third is core zones are present in biosphere reserve only. So you can see the first, biosphere reserves are the most comprehensive protected area. That's true. Hotels and resorts can be established in eco-sensitive zone under regulation. That's a regulated activity that we have just now discussed. And core zones are present in biosphere reserve only. That's wrong, because it's also present in national park. It's also present in wildlife sanctuaries. Clear? So 1, 2 would be the correct answer. This is the correct answer. Fine. Now consider the following statements and select the correct code. The essential component of lichens is algae. Now, the essential component would be fungus. See, the photosynthetic partner varies. The photosynthetic partner in this would be generally an algae, but sometimes it can be bacteria. But essential component, fungus would always be present. Serre is the process through which vegetation is established in an area. Now that's wrong. Why? Because serre is what? Serre is the sequential manner. It's not the process. So the sequential manner we refer to as serre. Pine is an example of opportunist species. That's also wrong. Why? Because this is an example of what? It is an example of climax plants. So you can see all the three are incorrect, none of the above. All the three are incorrect. Fine. Is that clear? Yes, yes, very good, very good. See question 3 and 4. Which one of the following statement is incorrect? Keystone species are responsible for maintaining the structure of the ecosystem. That's true. Identification of ecosystem can be based on indicator species only. That's false. Wrong. Flagship species are symbolic in nature. Yes, that's true. Because for this purpose, you have to select other parameters just now. An umbrella species can be flagship species. Yes, sometimes it can be flagship species also. That's right. So the incorrect answer is what? The incorrect answer is B. Which one of the following is the correct order of decreasing ecological productivity? I have given you individually also. 2500 gram per centimeter square is of mangrove swamps. 2000 is of coral reefs. An estuary is 1800. An open ocean is 135. So first option is correct. First option is correct. Clear? Next. See, consider the following statements and select the correct code. Now, both these statements, ecological footprint, correct definition has been given. Correct definition has been given. It's the amount of measure of amount of biological land and water needed to supply a population with renewable resources that you are utilizing also. Renewable resources. And to absorb or dispose of water from such resource only. That's true. Water footprint of an individual, community or a basis is believed to be the total volume of fresh water to produce goods and services consumed by the individual or community or produced by the business. That's also true. So both are correct definitions of what is called as water footprint and ecological footprint. I haven't taught you in the class, but this should be known to you. And there's a type of footprint which is called as carbon footprint. Carbon footprint is the emission which would be attributed to a single person or to an industrial unit. So that kind of footprint would be called as what? That kind of footprint would be referred to as carbon footprint. The emission which can be attributed to a single person, me suppose is an individual, you suppose as an individual, clear? Or it is the emission attributed to industrial unit, that this industrial unit is responsible. So that would be called as the carbon footprint of the industrial unit. I am coming here, I am using my own vehicle. So vehicular emission is responsible there. Then suppose air conditioner is used. All these comes at the cost of energy. So certain amount of emission would be attributed to me or to you also. Now this would be called as my carbon footprint and your carbon footprint. Clear? My carbon footprint and your carbon footprint. So that's one thing. Second, we can see Consider the following statements and select the correct code. Mutual interaction between biotic and abiotic component is responsible for determining genetic and species diversity. That's true. Viruses, fungus, bacteria and algae are responsible for decomposition of dead plants and animals. It cannot be viruses, algae, bacteria and fungus, we understand. So the second statement is wrong. First statement is correct, so only one is the correct answer. Which one of the following statement related to ecotone is incorrect? And that you can easily say. See the third statement, mangrove can be considered as ecotone, but an estuary cannot. Estuary can also be considered as an ecotone because it's a demarcation zone between two ecosystems. One is your river ecosystem and second is marine ecosystem. Marine ecosystem and river ecosystem. Mangrove vegetation provides habitat for organisms that can survive in water and on land. That's true. So only incorrect statement is mangrove can be considered as ecotone, but estuary is an ecotone. Which one of the following statement related to chemosynthesis is incorrect? Incorrect is what? This process can be performed by algae. It would be performed by only and only bacteria. Clear? Only and only bacteria. Let's come back. So you solved one test. Every day we try to solve these types of tests so that the revision of the exercises can be done. Now see from here. We discuss here two processes. One is called as phytoremediation and second is called as bioremediation. So one is called as phytoremediation, second would be called as what? It's called as bioremediation. Suppose an area is contaminated. The contaminants are present in that area. An area is contaminated, contaminants are present in that area. And what happens that if we are responsible for removing contaminants from an area, what we generally do is that we are responsible for removing the contaminants from that area. We would be taking the contaminants, dumping it elsewhere. So we would be dumping it elsewhere. Now when we dump it elsewhere, we are creating a new polluted area. So one thing is that we have removed the polluted area. But the second concern is what? Second concern is that we are responsible for polluting a new area. A new area. So it won't be considered as a judicious method for removal of pollutants. When you are talking about extracting the pollutants from that area and dumping it elsewhere, it cannot be considered because on one side you are responsible for making the area pollution free, but on the other side you have created a new polluted area. So this won't be wise. Clear? This won't be wise. But if suppose plants are used for this purpose, some plants, they have the characteristic. If plants are used for this purpose, some plants, they have the characteristic that they would be responsible for absorbing contaminants, they derive nutrition from them and discharge waste products which do not and discharge waste products which are not detrimental for environment. Clear? Which do not damage the environment in any way. Now this process would be called as phytoremediation. So phyto means plants, remediation means restoring balance. So if plants are used for restoring balance of an area, this process would be called as what? It would be called as phytoremediation. Clear? If plants are used for restoring balance of an area, then the process would be referred to as phytoremediation. And these types of plants which are responsible for doing so, would be called as what? Would be called as hyperaccumulator. And their characteristic of absorbing the pollutants would be referred to as what? It would be referred to as hypertolerance. So there are three terms: hyperaccumulator, hypertolerance, and phytoremediation. For example, poplar tree is responsible for phytoremediation. Write down phytoremediation. Phyto. Phytoremediation. It is the process through which plants are used for removing contaminants. Plants are used for removing contaminants. They absorb these contaminants. Derive nutrition from them. They absorb these contaminants, derive nutrition from them, and discharge waste products. Which do not hamper the environment in any way. Which do not hamper the environment in any way. These types of plants are referred to as hyperaccumulators. These types of plants are referred to as hyperaccumulators. For example, poplar tree is a hyperaccumulator, and their ability to absorb the pollutants is referred to as hypertolerance, and their ability to absorb the pollutants is referred to as hypertolerance. So you can see three words here. Phytoremediation is a process. The types of plants would be called as hyperaccumulator, and the characteristic of plants would be called as hypertolerance. And it's not that only and only plants would be responsible for this. This characteristic is present with microorganisms as well. And when microorganisms are responsible for removal of contaminants, then that process would be called as what? It is called as bioremediation. Right now, this characteristic is not only present with plants. It is also present with microorganisms. But when microorganisms are responsible for absorbing the pollutants, But if microorganisms are responsible for absorbing the pollutants, the process is referred to as bioremediation. The process is referred to as bioremediation. So if plants perform this, then it is called as phytoremediation. If microorganisms are responsible for it, then it is called as what? It is called as bioremediation. So, if microorganisms are responsible, it is referred to as bioremediation. For example, suppose we talk about Pseudomonas. Pseudomonas are bacteria which has the ability of removing oil spill. And how oil spill would be removed? Because Pseudomonas, they absorb the oil droplets, derive nutrition from them, and discharge waste products which do not hamper the environment in any way. So, they discharge waste products which do not hamper the environment in any way. So, that's a bacteria which is a nitrite bacteria in the nitrogen cycle, but is meaningful here. Write down. If you have written that a microorganism is used for removal of contaminants, then the process is called as what? It's called as bioremediation. So, the we can see that it is microorganism would be responsible for not only removal of contaminants, they would be also getting nutrients from them. Now, we can see that in the year 2010, there was a very famous oil spill near Chitra in Mumbai, and this oil spill was successfully removed by the process of bioremediation. And the technique which was used for this purpose was called as oil zapper technique. Oil zapper technique. So, the technique which was used. Write down. In the year 2010, the Chitra oil spill, occurred near that's wrong. The Chitra oil spill occurred near Mumbai. Chitra oil spill occurred near Mumbai, which was successfully removed, with the help of oil zapper technology. And in which Pseudomonas were used. So, in this technology we can see Pseudomonas were used, Clear? But then we know that this technology is not well developed for mangrove areas. So, we will see that what kind of mechanism can be used if suppose mangrove areas are present. So, what kind of mechanism would be used? So, let us see that also. Clear? Let us see that also. See, there was a accomplishment made by the Malabar Botanical Institute and the Bharat Petroleum Limited. So, Malabar Botanical Institute is in Kozhikode and the Bharat Petroleum Limited. Both these organizations combined together, and they were responsible for developing 3 variants of bacteria. Now, these 3 variants of bacteria, 2 variants were of a bacterium which was called as Burkholderia, and 1 variant was of a bacterium which is called as what? Burkholderia, and second one bacterium was of a variant which is called as what? Pseudomonas. So, 2 of Burkholderia and 1 of Pseudomonas. So what is unique that they have developed? The Malabar Botanical Institute and the Bharat Petroleum Limited. Now what they have done is, they have prepared these variants by genetic engineering. So they have altered the gene. The purpose is what? Why they have altered the gene? So that these variants would be responsible for developing or secreting enzymes. And these enzymes, this enzyme is called as what? This enzyme is referred to as catechol. Catechol, the full name is catechol 2,3-deoxygenase. So this enzyme is called as catechol. And these are what? These are hydrocarbon degenerating enzymes. So what is oil? Oil is nothing but hydrocarbon only. Clear? Oil is nothing but hydrocarbon only. Fine. Write down two institutes. Malabar Botanical Institute, two institutes, Malabar Botanical Institute, and Bharat Petroleum Limited. Malabar Botanical Institute and Bharat Petroleum Limited have developed three variants of bacteria, of which two were of three variants of bacteria through genetic engineering, we can mention, through genetic engineering, of which two variants were of a bacteria named Burkholderia. Two variants were of a bacterium called Burkholderia, and one was of Pseudomonas. And what is the purpose? Now these variants have been developed. Just 1 second. See, in the year 2018, we were just discussing that two institutes, Malabar Botanical Institute and Bharat Petroleum Limited, they developed what? They developed three variants of bacteria through genetic engineering, of which two variants were of Burkholderia and one of Pseudomonas. And these have the ability to remove oil spill. Write down. Three variants through genetic engineering, I think that you have written, out of which two variants were of Burkholderia, out of which two variants were of Burkholderia, and one of Pseudomonas. Two variants were of Burkholderia and one of Pseudomonas, which have the ability to remove oil spill, And how they remove oil spill? Because they are responsible for secreting an enzyme. And this enzyme is called as what? It is called as catechol. The full name is catechol 2,3-deoxygenase. So this enzyme is secreted by them. So the full name is catechol 2,3-deoxygenase. And this enzyme is what? It is an hydrocarbon degenerating enzyme. Hydrocarbon degenerating enzyme. Write down, they secrete an enzyme called catechol 2,3-deoxygenase. Catechol 2,3-deoxygenase. You can remember only catechol. No need of remembering in the entire term. Catechol 2,3-deoxygenase. Now what is this? This is a hydrocarbon degenerating enzyme. Write down, it is a hydrocarbon degenerating enzyme. And what is oil? Oil is nothing but hydrocarbon. Clear? Oil is nothing but hydrocarbon. And we are studying these in details. Why? Because oil spill has been identified as a disaster in India. So that's a disaster in India. So if suppose a question comes on oil spill, all these things can be written. Clear? All these things can be written. So that's about phytoremediation, bioremediation. But we can see that as far as bioremediation is concerned, there are three techniques in bioremediation. One is called as, some techniques of bioremediation includes, one is called as bioventing, second is called as biosparging, and third is called as bioaugmenting. So let's understand that what are the techniques of bioremediation. There are three latest techniques of bioremediation. So let's discuss those techniques also. See. See, if suppose in the soil contaminants are present, microorganism is also present in the soil, but oxygen is lacking. Where this will happen? This will happen in mangrove swamps, because the soil does not consist of oxygen due to salinity. Clear? The soil does not consist of oxygen due to salinity of soil. So we have said that in case the contaminants are present in the soil where oxygen is lacking but microorganisms are present, and these contaminants would be decomposed by the microorganism, but aerobic decomposition would take place. So in this area what happens, that since oxygen is lacking, so what we are doing is we are making a vent. See the vent. And through this vent, oxygen is artificially supplied to the soil. But it would be supplied to the soil in a regulated manner, and it would be utilized by a regulated manner, because if you supply excessive amount of oxygen to the soil, some of the contaminants are volatile in nature. So it would be supplied to the soil in a regulated manner so that the contaminants utilize the oxygen, the microorganism utilize the oxygen for the decomposition of contaminants. So this process through which we are responsible for supplying oxygen through a vent into the soil is called as what it is referred to as bioventing, because we have made a vent and supplied oxygen to the soil. So this would be called as what? This would be referred to as bioventing. Clear? But a better method under same condition would be that why not supply oxygen in the same condition? Microorganism is present, contaminants, oxygen is lacking. Why not supply the oxygen to the saturated zone below the fossil water? See, there are different types of water. Water which is present in your soil, which is trapped inside the soil as a fraction of rainfall. This kind of water is called as what? This kind of water is referred to as green water. Green water. The water which comes out of your drain is called as what? It is referred to as the grey water, because it is dirty. The water which comes out after the industrial use also would be called as what? It would be called as grey water. And the water which is present in your undisturbed space. Now this is your undisturbed space. And the water which is present in your undisturbed space would be called as fossil water, and it can be called as what? It can be called as paleo water also. Paleo water. Water which is present in rivers and lakes would be called as blue water. Clear? Blue water. But this is called as fossil water or paleo water. Fine. Fossil water or paleo water. I recapitulate. Water which as a fraction of rainfall is present inside the soil would be called as what? It would be called as green water. Clear? Water which comes out of your drain would be called as grey water. Water which is present in lakes or rivers would be called as blue water. Water which is present in your undisturbed space like this is called as fossil water or is called as paleo water. So let us supply oxygen to the saturated zone below the fossil water so that oxygen sparges out from water and would be supplied to the soil in a regulated manner, in a limited manner, in a regulated manner, so that it can be better utilized by the microorganism for the decomposition of contaminant. Now this process would be called as biosparging, because it is coming out of the water in a sparging manner. So this would be called as biosparging. Clear? And the third is what? Bio-augmenting. Bio-augmenting. This is referred to as bio-augmenting. Now in this case, what will happen? Oxygen is present, but contaminants are also present. What is lacking is your microorganism. So we do not have microorganism in the soil. So how would it be decomposed? It would be decomposed how? It would be decomposed by preparing microorganism in the lab. So we'll prepare microorganism in the lab through tissue culture and culture. So cultured microorganism. Culture is what? Culture is the growth of cells of plants, animals and microorganism on the large scale in a controlled condition in the lab. So we'll prepare cultured microorganism in the lab and supply it to the soil so that it can be decomposed. Clear? Write down new techniques of bioremediation. New techniques of bioremediation. See, it depends upon the area where this technique would be conducted. First two technique would be conducted where it would be conducted in those areas which are mangrove areas, because the soil is saline in nature, lacking oxygen. You have said that these three techniques you have said is done one after another, not necessarily, or separate. They can be separate in operation in accordance with the conditions of that particular area. Yes, definitely in accordance with the conditions of that particular area. Clear? The first two would be for mangrove and this won't be for mangrove because oxygen is adequately present. Write down new techniques of bioremediation. Write down. If the soil is contaminated, but oxygen is lacking in the soil, if the soil is contaminated but oxygen is lacking in the soil, with the help of a vent, oxygen would be adequately supplied, so that oxygen would be adequately supplied so that it is utilized by microorganism for the decomposition of contaminants. Microorganism for the decomposition of contaminant. Utilized by microorganism for the decomposition of contaminant. Clear? So this process would be called as what? This process is, but the supply of oxygen should be in a regulated manner. Write down, but the supply of oxygen should be in a regulated manner. Supply of oxygen should be in a regulated manner. Supply of oxygen would be in a regulated manner. Clear? Regulated manner. But supply of oxygen should be in a regulated manner. Why? Because we have discussed that some of the contaminants can be volatile in nature. If excessive supply of oxygen is done, it won't be fruitful. Now, this process would be called as what? It is called as bioventing. Write down. This process is called as bioventing. So, what you have done? You have made a vent and through it oxygen would be supplied so that it can be utilized by microorganism for the decomposition of contaminant. So, this process would be called as what? This process is referred to as bioventing. Clear? Bioventing. Write down. A better method would be biosparging. In which under the same circumstances, oxygen would be directly supplied. To the saturated zone below the fossil water. Oxygen would be directly supplied to the saturated zone below the fossil water. Now, what will happen due to that? The oxygen would sparge out from the water and be supplied to the soil in a more regulated manner, which would be better utilized by microorganism for the decomposition of contaminant. Right down, the oxygen would sparge out. And supplied to the soil and supply to the soil in a regulated manner, and supply to the soil in a regulated manner, which would be better utilized by, microorganism, for the decomposition of contaminant, Now, this would be supplied in a regulated limited manner. That's why it is better utilized by microorganism for the decomposition of contaminant. Now, the third case is what? In this case, when the soil is contaminated, oxygen is adequately present, but microorganism is lacking. Write down third case. When the soil is contaminated, oxygen is adequately present. When the soil is contaminated, oxygen is adequately present, but microorganism is lacking. Oxygen is adequately present, but microorganism is lacking. Cultured microorganism would be developed in the lab. That is through culture. This multiplication of cells on a large scale inside the lab in a controlled condition is called as culture, where we are using a liquid or a semi-solid for the growth of these cells. We sterilize the liquid, and then when we use nutrients and hormones for development of these kind of cells. So write down cultured microorganism would be developed in the lab. And supply to the soil. So that it utilizes the oxygen adequately present. For the decomposition of contaminant. Now, this would be called as what? This process would be called as bioaugmenting. Write down, this process is referred to as bioaugmenting. So, bioventing, biosparging and bioaugmenting. Clear? Bioaugmenting. Now, let's move forward. See, one key issue that you can see today is your landfills, because in newspapers they talk today more and more of landfills, which is a growing concern in big cities of India, because each and every city of India has huge landfill. Every big city has huge landfill. For example, if suppose we talk about here in Delhi, there are 3 big landfills in Delhi. One is your Ghazipur, that is Noida. Second is your Bhalaswa, which is near Rohini. And third landfill is your Narela Bhavana. In Mumbai, landfills are there also. For example, Devnar landfills in Mumbai. So, big landfills are present in metropolitan cities of India. Now, this is not good fame for us, that landfills are present in metropolitan cities of India. That's not good for us. Not at all good reputation for us. And why so? Because landfills are a growing concern. First concern is what? Landfills either collapse or landfills burn. Landfills either collapse or landfills burn. And collapsing landfills, we have examples. For example, Ghazipur landfill in Noida collapsed. And due to collapsing of this landfill, a person died because he was trapped inside the waste. So due to collapsing of this landfill, a person died as he was trapped inside the waste, and the Supreme Court was responsible for making the observation that this is the worst kind of death that a person can have, because a person was trapped inside a landfill. So that's the example of Gazipur landfill. So that's landfills collapse and landfills burn also. For example, in Mumbai, we can see the Deonar landfill site. Now this is the example of burning landfills. So landfills, either they collapse, they burn also, and we have cited examples. But we can see today that landfills, these are not only the two perspectives. Today we can see near the landfills in the underground water table, last year's report suggested what? Last year's report suggested that in the underground water table, what has happened? Contamination of heavy metals have taken place. For example, lead was found in the underground water table, which is present near the Bhalaswa landfills. So it was reported that contamination of the underground water has taken place through heavy metals. So that's the third concern, third perspective. The fourth perspective is that landfills are a source of odor pollution. The fifth perspective is that landfills are a source of what? It is a it's a dumping site of e-commerce waste. So let's cover up odor pollution in e-commerce waste here only. And also we can see that the other thing about landfills is that not only it's a source of odor pollution or source of, suppose, dumping site of e-commerce waste. Landfills are the area from where toxic gases are emitted. And then we have to talk that what are the toxic gases, what is the name of dioxins and furans. So let's register all these things. Clear? Write down landfills, make a topic called landfills. Landfills. Write down landfills are a growing concern. Landfills are a growing concern. Growing concern in the metropolitan cities of India. Landfills are a growing concern in the metropolitan cities of India due to a number of reasons. First, landfills either collapse. Example, landfills either collapse. Example, Gazipur of collapsing landfill. Gazipur, Noida, UP. Either collapse or either burn. Landfills either collapse or either burn. For example, burning landfills, we can cite an example, Deonar. And where is Deonar? Deonar is in Mumbai. That's a dumping site. Landfills either collapse, for example, Gazipur. In that case, the Supreme Court made the observation, or either burn. For example, Deonar dumping site. Or either burn. Now, second perspective, that's one perspective that we have discussed. Only one perspective we have discussed. Clear? Now, we can see the second perspective is that underground water near landfills are contaminated with heavy metals, which includes lead also. And this is the report of Bhalaswa landfill, which is present near Rohini in Delhi. Right on the underground water near the landfills. Second perspective. The underground water near the landfills have been contaminated with heavy metals, have been contaminated with heavy metals. Have been contaminated with heavy metals. Sir, does the Brahmapuram waste plant fire also count in here? Yes, you can write, but we are talking about the dumping sites mainly. Because last year you can see a number of articles were there on the landfills. So if suppose a number of articles are there on the landfills, it becomes a probable question for your mains examination and also preliminary examination. So one perspective we have discussed that landfills collapse and burn, and second perspective that the underground water near landfills are contaminated by heavy metals. And these heavy metals include, for example, we can say lead. Write down. For example, underground water near Bhalaswa landfill. For example, underground water near Bhalaswa landfill. Has been contaminated by lead. Fine. Although you can see that heavy metals are responsible for contamination of major rivers of India also. For example, the common 3 heavy metals can be seen in the rivers of India. And these heavy metals which are seen in the rivers of India include iron, chromium, and also lead. Fine. Iron, chromium, and lead. So there are 3 heavy metals which are responsible for contamination of major rivers of India. Write down. There are 3 heavy metals which are responsible for. Contamination of major rivers of India. There are 3 heavy metals which are responsible for contamination of major rivers of India, which includes iron, chromium, and lead. Now that's the second perspective, that underground water near the landfills are contaminated by heavy metals. We have cited an example, Bhalaswa landfill, lead is the contaminator, heavy metal, and this is present. Clear? Fine. Now let's see the third perspective. And what is the third perspective in this regard? That we talk about that collapsing landfills we have said. Then we have said about the burning landfills we have discussed. Then we have discussed that the landfills area, we can see underground water is polluted with heavy metals, and heavy metals like lead are responsible for pollution of underground water. Clear? Pollution of underground water, heavy metals like lead are responsible. Fine. So that we can say. But the third perspective is what? The third perspective is that landfills are today a source of what? It's a source of odor pollution. Landfills are a source of odor pollution. And how? Odor pollution. What is odor pollution? Odor pollution means the odor means smell. So smell comes out of the landfills. WHO has considered odor as a type of pollutant. WHO considers odor as a type of pollutant. And this odor, which is considered by WHO as a type of pollutant, is responsible for what? It is responsible for loss of sleep. It's not only responsible for loss of sleep, it is also responsible for affecting the social well-being of a person. It is also responsible for not only loss of sleep, but also vomiting tendency, stress and anxiety. So all these are present in odor pollution, the adverse impact of odor pollution, we can say. But when we talk about landfills, landfills are a source of odor pollution, although source of odor pollution includes many other. Slaughterhouse, fish market, all stormwater drains, all these are the sources of odor pollution. In India, we can see there is no law related to odor pollution. Only a number of complaints have been filed before the CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board, in context of odor pollution, but there is no law in India related to odor pollution. So, number of complaints before. But as far as odor pollution is concerned, what needs to be done for this purpose? So, we can do what? We can establish a buffer zone near the landfills. Buffer zone. You cannot establish your colonies or residential areas attached to the landfills. No. The impact of collapsing landfills would be there, odor pollution would be there. So, we need to establish a buffer zone in the surrounding areas of landfills where no habitation would be established. So, this can be done, first thing. The second thing is that we should be responsible for establishing what is called as tight olfactometry standards. Fine, tight olfactometry standards. So, that should be done in India. Olfactometer should be used to check the level of smell. So, that can be done in India. And also we can see that the main concern is what? The main concern is liquid or solid waste which is generated. So, we should be responsible for checking the amount of liquid and solid waste which is generated. So, that's, and we can see the waste. There is a system of what is called as odor hours. Odor hours. Now, odor hours means that if in any hour there is 6 minutes of recognizable smell, then that hour would be called as odor hour. So, the purpose is to limit these hours. And limit these hours how? By limiting the source of smell. Clear? So, the purpose is to limit these hours, limiting the source of the smell. Fine. So, this initiative also can be given. But best method would be to check the source of the smell, which is liquid or solid waste. Write down. Second perspective we have discussed. Now we are discussing in the third perspective. Write down. Landfills are a source of odor pollution. Landfills are a source of odor pollution. Odor pollution. WHO considers odor to be a type of pollutant. WHO considers odor to be a type of pollutant. Odor to be a type of pollutant which is responsible for not only, so WHO has recognized odor pollution, which is responsible for not only see the question that you have asked, in case of landfills, legacy waste is a problem. Understand. as a solution why incineration has not been chosen as a measure when it is obvious that there would be some damages which we have to accept for a long-term benefit. See, there won't be damage which you can accept because landfills are full of plastic, and burning of landfills means poisonous gases would be emitted, dioxins and furans, which are carcinogenic in nature. So that cannot be preferred. We cannot prefer them. Fine. We have written that landfills are a source of odor pollution. WHO recognizes odor as a type of pollutant which is responsible for stress and anxiety, loss of sleep, stress and anxiety, loss of sleep. So all these can happen due to odor pollution. Vomiting. So all these things can happen due to odor pollution. Stress and anxiety, loss of sleep, vomiting. Fine. And the source of odor pollution is not only landfills but also some other areas. Right on, the source of odor pollution apart from landfills include that's the last line that we would be writing today, and tomorrow we'll try to complete it. Include fish market, slaughterhouse, fish market, slaughterhouse includes fish market, slaughterhouse, stormwater drains, distilleries, among others. Clear? So all this. In India, there is no law related to odor pollution. But a number of complaints have been filed before CPCB, that is Central Pollution Control Board. Central Pollution Control Board. Clear? Fine. And landfills are a source of odor pollution that we have discussed. Now tomorrow we will try to discuss that what can be done for odor pollution. Clear? What can be done for odor pollution? And then the other perspective we'll discuss, that why landfills would be related to e-waste, e-commerce waste, and the other perspective what needs to be done for this purpose. Thank you so much. Any queries? Fine. Thank you so much.